All right, welcome to the February Every Second Matters. This is 2021, and Every Second Matters has been around since late 2013. It's an awareness campaign. The concept is to remember our Second Amendment and what it protects, and on the second of each month. And to do that in different ways over the years, it's evolved, and people have taken it to mean different things and have explored it in different ways, done different things with it. This is a YouTube channel that at some point was created, and I guess we're running it now. And we go live whenever we can. So we posted the link to this out on various places and encourage people to share that link. We also sent out an invite to a bunch of different people in the community. We're starting out with Jeff from Firearms Coalition.
Hey.
And then Clover jumping in from Texas, Clover Tack.
Hey, good to be here.
From Gun Websites. And if anybody is out there, this is a conversation. It's not so much a show. We're on the internet. So we have keyboards in front of us that allows us to communicate with the stuff that we're watching. So we take that to heart, and we're watching the conversation out here. I sent out the email with a couple of points to talk about, and invited people to bring whatever to a topics they might have. So that's what I'll start with, is asking, did you guys have anything you guys want to bring up, talk about?
There's a little bit of news in the NRA, but that we can touch on. But other than that, I'm just here to see what people are caring about right now.
Right on. We've been actually chatting for a bit offline, so before the show started. So I'm going to try to not just jump into stuff and assume or start a conversation right in the middle of someplace. But Clover, did you have anything that you bring into the show that you wanted to chat about?
I don't know how deep we can get into my YouTube thing because I can't get into too many specifics, but we can certainly talk about the movement on that particular effort.
Yeah, feel free. Right before Jeff jumped in off air, Clover and I were chatting about a project that he's working on that's just sort of in the works. So it's sort of not for public yet, but certainly going to be interesting. Yeah, go ahead and chat as much as you want about it.
So yeah, I mean, basically been working behind the scenes for a while now to affect some of the YouTube policies and whatnot, and had a meeting today and discussed again a lot of the things I can't go into details about, at least not at this point, but just to say it was a very productive conversation. We agreed on a lot of different things as far as the platform. We sort of identified some courses of action moving forward, some things that we need to do. We being the gun tubers, the YouTube content creators, whatever, that are proposing changes to the policy and everything else. And the team that we met with today just identified some things moving forward that we're going to work on. I mean, it's going to be a bit of a slow burn, obviously. I think most people have to realize when you first of all, just having the opportunity to align with something like Google and them being willing to not only listen to you, but end up agreeing on a lot of different points and develop.
The way I understood it, you were out there doing your thing in such a way that Google, the people that own YouTube and are writing the policy that is at the heart of a lot of issues that we have as far as who can even use the platform or how they can use it or who can advertise or how they can advertise or why, or the perceptions even associated with all that company decided that because of the way you're doing your thing, they decided to approach you and ask if you would be able to help find the people that would do this thing that isn't
easy
to describe, and then tasked you with
yeah. I mean, it was sort of a selfish thing, honestly. To an extent at first. I mean,
Still, you did what you did in order for them to tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hey, can we talk to you for a minute?" You're allowed to have whatever reasons you want to have said, sure, let's talk. But
Sure.
what you're doing with it now, when you're able to talk about it, or if you do, yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Right. Well, it just got to a certain point to where I had connections, and then through certain connections, friendships, whatever you want to call them, I was able to, deal with some things on my own channel, deal with some things on some other creators' channels on a small perspective. But, as we worked on that stuff, we've seen some people always want to talk about systemic is a word that they use, but we've seen some systemic issues with policy and enforcement and over enforcement and lack of consistency of enforcement and all of these other issues that they weren't going to be addressed by one creator, one person, or even two or three within YouTube, willing to help out. I mean, it was something that needed to be collaborated on a much greater scale. So at that point, it was, yeah, you're right. The conversation shifted from how could we help you, right, to what can we do to make this overall environment a better environment, right, for everybody. And
well, again, thanks for doing it, because somebody else would have said like, oh, you can help me by fixing this video. Thank you very much. And then they would have had that email where they would have considered that, a contact. So whenever they have a problem, they can exploit that contact, where you decided not to just do that with it.
Right. Yeah, that's true. So, I'm optimistic with the direction, like I said, the way the meeting went today. And optimistic, moving forward about some of the things that we potentially can accomplish actually working together, which is, it sounds weird that, GunTuber's working with YouTube on policy issues. There's a lot of people out there that would mistakenly tell you that YouTube does not care, or YouTube has this bias, or YouTube is this, that, or the other, the devil.
It's as if there was a big room full of chairs that you have to navigate through in order to get to the other side of the room, and the people that took the chairs down didn't really care that much or pay that much attention to the layout. And it's as if you are now got their ear to say, hey, if you made the chairs in a different arrangement, they could still all be here. It's just that they wouldn't be confusing, and they'd actually be appropriate for what you're trying to accomplish here. And
Right.
Everybody would be a winner.
Right. And then there are people that think that those people who put the chairs down intentionally did so in a certain way, right? And they're not willing to even, and they're not willing.
This traffic jam, this was intentional.
Right.
Look at this traffic jam. This was because they're out to get us, when in
Right.
real life, they're like, oh, there's a traffic jam? We didn't even realize. So
Right.
what can we do differently? Oh, and it's that easy? Thank you.
Well, and worse than that, it's look at this traffic jam that they caused, and then I don't even want to have a conversation about it. Well, how are you ever going to rectify anything if you're not willing to sit down and get together and have a conversation, right?
All right. Well, at this point, we were chatting for a bit. People are showing up, but we're talking theoretical. But I do appreciate your effort and bringing it up, because there are things that are happening. Definitely don't let anybody tell you that it's all negative and they're all out to get us, because they are all just a bunch of people working from home like everybody else. And they are reaching out and talking to people, and stuff is being done for big picture. Anyway, so I've had topics that I sent out to everybody. I was just going to throw these out as bullet points for the people that are being part of this from the other side of the microphones, right? You're not watching this, you're participating in this conversation. You've got keyboards and other ways that you can be part of this. I'd like to talk about the evolution of our two-way fight, either the debate, the conversation, or the battle, because we got all of them coming up. There's probably more to that into that too. I just threw that out as a way to make the email concise, but there's probably a lot in the evolution of our two-way fight, right? A lot of different ways that it's going to need to evolve. I'd like to talk about effective multitasking versus distraction. So I do believe we're going to see, like never before, a diverse set of challenges that we're going to have to know how to divide resources and share and be competent and have faith in each other to take care of different things. We're going to have to accept some black eyes and things. And that's the kind of stuff that a lot of people have never dealt with. There's people that will give up as soon as it even just thinks about getting tough, let alone get a black eye or two, right? And we've got to be able to help with, I think, the difference between multitasking and distraction. Next up is our online environment as activists in 2021. And I guess I'm thinking of our tools that we have available to us, but there's probably other ways to interpret our online environment as activists. But, the ways that we communicate are going to be weaponized, or have already been weaponized. We maybe don't even realize it. learning the players in 2A. And since we got Jeff in here, I was actually bugging him to stick around so we could chat about that. So we'll probably do that first. Effective determination of important issues in 2021. Again, I think triage or whatever it's called to determine which is the important stuff getting thrown at us and which is the distractions. And again, I don't think anybody is we're not looking for a Superman to solve all our problems, right? We're figuring out ways that volunteers can solve all these problems. And I don't know, maybe it's too much to get into and every second matters or not, but who do we look to be those who are air traffic controllers or generals in the fight to help offer with wise awareness and experience, pointing directions for the volunteers to take action. Then stuff about how do we get more 2As to reach out to, and I have a whole big list of stuff here that I think is not being addressed. And there's so many people right now that are probably frustrated because they've got all this stuff up in the air. I look at these 2A issues as mortars. They've lobbed them. All these different politicians have lobbed these things up in the air. We don't know when and if they're going to land or how hard they're going to hit. If they're going to hit population centers or out in the lake, or what they're going to do. And if they hit in the lake, are they going to kill all the fish? Like, we don't know what's happening. But when people have unknown interest in doing something, let's give them something to do. We've got a whole big list of stuff we could talk about that I think are covered areas of the community. And then lastly, specifically the liberal gun owners, depending on who else might show up, if we get some liberal gun owners in here, I think it's time for them to be kicked out of the nest. 12 years in the game, at what point do they get to keep saying, you got to open up to liberal gun owners? Half the freaking gun owners I talk to are freaking liberals, more liberal than me. They need to understand that they are gun owners and that they aren't even new gun owners. After 12 years, for crying out loud, the old-fashioned perception of gun owners is gone. It's literally gone. Our grandparents have no more influence in the political elections. Our parents have no more influence in political elections other than like a cherry on top. We barely have influence in political, people my age. It's all the youngers. So, this whole idea of liberal gun owners is nuts. The conservative gun owners need to understand that, we have windbreakers on. Like, it's just should be rolling off of us. Like, we need to give this to the youngins. They need to start taking the load, right? Maybe I'm crazy. But anyway, these are all the issues that I threw out there for us to get started with. Anybody, after reading all that, anybody want to address any of those before we dig in?
Oh, I'm game to jump in on any of that.
Right on. So the first thing then, unless Clover's got something, is I'm going to move this over a little bit. I'll screen share, and I've got a thing I've been working on for a while now, which is basically a project to help me visualize, because I'm a visual person, I guess, visualize where we're at with our Second Amendment. So what we're looking at is a screen share, and I'm bringing up the Adobe Illustrator software. And this is just a ton, somewhere around 130 little cartoons, characters, whatever you want to say. I basically just bring up a person's face and draw a little cartoon on top of it to signify the people that created, either just 2A activists, people that created organizations, people that run organizations, people that wrote books, people like Jeff that kind of did a bunch of stuff. And I've done this chronologically, and I've done it by state. I've done it by like level of or area of focus. But I think one thing I haven't been able to do is get a good grasp on what these big organizations do. So I'm just got this here as sort of a reference to, the overall what we've done in the past. But what I'd like to do is pull over, for example, something like Alan created the Citizens Committee to keep and bear arms. As far as I'm aware, the Citizens Committee was the first thing to exist in the modern gun pro Second Amendment, pro gun owner movement, or whatever we're called. Was when Alan created whatever it says, CRGP, Citizens Committee. So
Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms.
So am I right? Is this the first of like the modern national level organizations devoted to 2A?
Exclusively devoted to 2A, probably so. What year did he do that?
71. It was just before ILA.
Okay.
And it was like technically, and I think the deal is that one of them, the Citizens Committee, was to do something lobbying, and then the Second Amendment Foundation is education, because what is it? Nonprofits can only kind of be focused on one thing, I guess, or tax exempt can only do one thing. So
Right.
that's how I kind of understand it. So Alan is in Washington. I think he was in DC at the time, but he's in Washington State now. So he started the Citizens Committee first, and as I understand it, it's lobbying, and then Second Amendment Foundation is education.
Right.
Then, if I understand it correctly, somewhere around then, your dad and Harlan told the NRA to not move to Colorado or wherever they were trying to ditch out to. Was it New Mexico or was it Colorado?
Colorado.
Okay, and then they stopped them from doing that with the October Revolt in '77, right? And this
Actually, it was, and just for clarification, it was Dad and some others that did that. Harlan came in as through a side door through that process, but he wasn't one of the organizers of the '77 revolt.
okay, he's just standing there at the time and became one of the necessary, or one of the key players, but he was just because they needed people to do the roles.
Right. At the '77 revolt, Dad nominated Harlan to be the executive vice president, and move him into that position because they fired the executive vice president at that meeting.
So if anybody wants to really do some hardcore awareness, Jeff's dad is the guy who, well, not only created the ILA, but helped reorganize the NRA at a time when they were planning to duck out of DC and ditch any kind of legal or political issues pretty much completely. Be like one of the sheep organizations or the deer organizations, like the Mule Deer Foundation or the Sheep Herders, or not Sheep Herder, but the Wild Sheep Foundation, or these different hunting groups that are just out there to advocate for the conservation or the advocacy for some critter, right? Like they always
Right. They wanted to be the Sierra Club with guns.
And you've got
The direction they were going.
you got stuff happens there, and I guess I don't know a good way to summarize it with you because you know about so much of it, but if I can summarize it crudely, ILA happened somewhere around the 90s. The NRA is like, well, you know what, we can make more money if we just keep fighting instead of actually being 2A. And your dad's like, no, let's be 2A. And then there was a big fight, and that's when Wayne brings in a guy from Planet of the Apes, and he says, from my cold dead hands. That's when your dad creates, or somewhere before that, but right around there is when your dad creates Firearms Coalition, which is what you and your brother now run, or you run, and it's basically your dad branching off from IL or from NRA, and this is an organization at its roots to get these other organizations, which are tiny at the time, which we haven't even talked about yet, but to help give them a place to work together or to coordinate or to do what I'm kind of talking about, like have a big picture view of all the different players.
It really came about in 1984, and the reason for it was that the NRA was lying to the members about what they were actually doing legislatively, and Dad was fed up with that, and he created the Firearms Coalition to provide accurate information out to the members of the NRA and the gun community at large. That was during the Biaggi bill debate, the whole cop killer bullet nonsense, and NRA was at the table with Biaggi negotiating on the language that they were going to accept for an armor-piercing handgun bullet ban, and they
now
were
this
telling
is 80s, and this
in the 1980s, and
this is Black Talons, and this is police.
no,
are saying that-
before Black Talons, this was the KTWs.
Okay,
But-
so I didn't realize. So I'm a kid back then. So this was.
Yeah.
So I just mixed it all with Black Talon. So basically, though, this is when armor goes from steel plate to soft body armor because they start saying armor piercing ammo is Teflon or whatever fancy ammo projectiles that are going to go through police armor being used by criminals and blah 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 because there's this new drug traffic with cocaine and everything that's happening, and then there's also starting to look at importation, so they're trying to set things up for restriction on importation for different reasons.
Right.
Now, did that you were younger, but you're at least more aware than I am. Was that a strategic setting up dominoes, or was it like circumstance that at the same time that they got to attack projectiles, they got to flip the definition of armor from tank armor and, you know, what we always consider like a steel plate to soft armor? Was it just that soft armor became more popular, or did they intentionally kind of conflate the two right there?
Soft body armor had just was just becoming popular at that time, and was being recognized as being a lifesaver for frontline police officers. Most cops at that time had to buy their own. There weren't a lot of departments that were supplying or providing.
It wasn't said science either, right? It was sort of like,
right.
Well, sure. So if you want to buy it, it's up to you because it's expensive and we don't have any
right
yet. Okay.
Right. And so, but NRA was at the table negotiating the language of the bill, and they were reporting to their members in the magazines that they had said no and that they were opposing it completely. And so Dad said no. They haven't said no. They aren't opposing it completely. They're in negotiating it, and they keep coming up with bad language. And we've found the bad language now that somebody made an AK pistol, somebody made an AR pistol, therefore 7.62 by 39 is a pistol round, and a bullet for a 7.62 by 39 that is made or contains any of these specific metals is an armor-piercing handgun ammunition, and therefore we can ban that. And that's where, you know, the attempted ban on the green tips, which expect to see that come back. That's going to be revived by the Biden administration, I have no doubt.
Okay, so I'm trying to lay out the map of the land just to kind of pull giant chaos that we've got over on the right here. So now that's the Citizens Committee. How do you summarize it?
I call it as KIRKPA.
KIRKPA, because it's the longest confusing name ever. Citizens Committee is what most of everybody, I think, says. So right. The Second Amendment Foundation is really what it is, but Alan has two separate organizations there from the get-go, and one of them crosses the line, so it gets to be first. Now, at the same time, California is trying to ban handguns for lots of different reasons, and H.R. Richardson, or Bill Richardson, I don't know how to say it, I don't know the guy. So Richardson, though, decides to make gun owners of California. This is like 1975-ish. That turns into Gun Owners of America. Soon after, Eric's dad takes over, and Larry Pratt, right, takes over and runs Gun Owners of America up until like a week ago, and then Eric took over. So Gun Owners of America's over here coming from the roots of California handgun ban. Then you don't really see another national level player, unless I'm wrong, until FPC comes along and decides to create a name that's literally two of the same words from your dad's thing, and then puts policy in it to confuse everybody. And then is created by Second Amendment Foundation to do what I think everybody was trying, needs to have done, be a coordinator for everybody. But then had bad ties. And I don't know if this is off the record or what, because I've never been told anything off the record. I'm just gleaning this from discussions and people not telling me stuff. But I think that they started with Second Amendment, like under their wing, and then at some point said something happened. And now they're no longer with Second Amendment Foundation. Now they're a major player. And unless I'm wrong, these are and then we got Every Second Matters, but these are the major players at the national level. First off, does anybody know if I'm missing any major ones? We got NRA, ILA, we got Second Amendment Foundation, Gun Owners of America, and FPC, and then firearms policy.
Yeah, there's NAGR is out there, though they're not doing much besides raising money and getting in the way.
Yeah, I didn't ever recognize them. I put them on the thing, but I'll take this opportunity to just say it because nobody pays me except for my Patreons. I can't see NAGR doing anything except taking at least $4 million off the table every year and claiming to do a bunch of stuff that like at least two other groups in Colorado claim. And I haven't gotten anybody except a paid sponsor to ever saying anything different about NAGR. They've never showed up to Gun Rights Policy Coalition or conference that I'm aware of. And again, the only people I ever know that talk about them are paid representatives. So with that said, I don't consider them a national. USCCA is a membership thing that was membership website, and then turned into a magazine, and then turned into a, we're going to give you some insurance as an incentive to buy the magazine, and then the insurance was the reason to do it, and now it's a community. So since it's been in flux, I know it's at a national level, but it doesn't stay the same overall goal for more than a few weeks, or I shouldn't say that, more than a few years. And I haven't seen them do anything pro 2A other than help promote the industry, which is awesome. But I draw a line between industry and 2A.
Yeah, I actually had a handshake deal with USCCA back 12, 14 years ago to create a legislative division for them and to get them full blown into Second Amendment fight. And for some reason that I don't know, they backed out of that deal and nothing ever happened with that. But I think that they have quite a bit of potential and could do something useful. And you know, maybe they will
with
at
the
some
infrastructure
point.
and experience and Rolodex. Like, come on, yeah. I think a lot of the industry, I'm going to consider them industry at this point. A lot of the industry stuff I'm not going to include just because they don't do anything other than create a giant industry that lets us all have awesome stuff and do stuff. But as far as like just what we're talking about, politics and legal stuff, I think these are the players. So I'm just kidding with this. We're just a bunch of people talking to each other. But if this is the case, and this is what I guess, this was just a long explanation to get us to here. Now, of course, I'm ignoring everything that's come since 2015, which is a heck of a lot of amazing effort by individuals, but that's the new 2A. This is our history. This is where we come from. This starts in 1971, 1975, 1975, 1980, 1990, and what is this, 2010 or something, 2008. So this is history. But what I was going to ask Jeff, because I don't have this all down, and I'm sure it's just second nature to you, is what are these things as far as like their positions? Like, well, I know that Second Amendment Foundation, I think, is education, and that's like their main thing. Or is there, I don't think they're lobbying. Is their thing court cases?
Education and litigation.
Okay, education and litigation.
Right. And they did have the best litigation program going. I felt that their approach was smarter and sharper than anybody else's. I haven't seen much about that recently, but they had Alan Gura in their corner, working on, bringing bit by bit, bringing cases to the Supreme Court to build the foundation and build up the whole case for Second Amendment litigation. And they had a good strategy and good approach to it. Unfortunately, their approach to it often conflicted with NRA's approach to it, and it was challenging and has been challenging for years. But that's their strongest suit, in my opinion, for the Second Amendment Foundation, is their legal team.
And they've brought us Miller and Heller, or just Miller?
Just
McDonald.
McDonald is the biggie that they brought. They've got several smaller cases that they have accomplished and established some foundational law with those. But McDonald is the big one. Of course, Alan Gura was the lead counsel in Heller, but
that was more like a bunch of rich dudes said, "Hey, let's play Trading Places on the Second Amendment, and let's just decide what happens if we buy some lawyers and sick them on the Second Amendment and see what happens."
Well, it's actually a rich guy with who was a libertarian minded and said this is ripe for getting something done, and so they put together a case in DC. He brought in a hot gun lawyer who was Alan Gura.
So not so much just being bored cats looking to play with their prey, but instead somebody was like being more like a Robin Hood, or like I think I can make this for justice right here.
Yeah, he he saw an opportunity to make a case for the Second Amendment, and he took that opportunity. And I'm going to have to step away for just a second, Pete. So,
Yeah, no worries.
I'll be right back.
Yeah, no problem. I'll make Clover say the rest of this. So now, where would you say the rest of these are? So I'm trying to figure out, and then I'm going to start figuring out what the percentages are. But I figure everybody's playing a different zone, right? And there's people that are like, oh, this is all about lobbying, right? Like this is a game of lobbying. But I forget which gun rights policy somebody said something to the effect of, yeah, if all your eggs are in the basket of lobbying, as soon as something gets through and now it has to be a court case, what do you do? So you need court cases or people skilled at court cases too. And then if all of that is only a consequence if your grassroots didn't work first. So you need grassroots too. And you can't have grassroots if people are a bunch of dinguses. So you need education and awareness, I guess. So it's almost like it's a convention. It's like a circle that, we get played into some kind of BS mechanism, like I always say, because we're not understanding that it's just a game that we don't all have to do it all, right? We just have to know, like, okay, I'm interested in these 4 things, and imagine if we all knew what the things were, and now there was a little gauge next to them. Have you ever seen Hey Jackass, the website Hey Jackass?
No, I haven't.
I'm sure you have. As soon as I get there, you'll see what I'm talking about, and you'll be like, oh yeah, I've seen this. I think it's .com. So it's called Hey Jackass, I guess, so you can remember it, and because it's always good when somebody who owns an awesome name does something awesome with their name. So it's Illustrating Chicago Values is the sub name of it, and it's an up-to-date tally of the violence in Chicago. And it's done tongue-in-cheek, almost like Monty Python-ish, but it's a legit, real data. It's often used when back in the day when we'd have decent conversations about 2A or something like this, the Every Second Matters conversation. It's decent, up-to-date information, not really biased. It's just unfortunately horrible, real statistics of what's going on in Chicago. But imagine if we had something like this, something that's legit, something that's consistent, something that's non-biased and not focused on making money or mockery of the thing. This plays a little bit too much humor to it, but I think it's because they have to live in there. I'm guessing it's from Chicago. But anyway, if there was something like this, a one-page dashboard. This is what I'd like Every Second Matters to become. That'd be awesome. Have a one-page dashboard that just showed you where the different bills are and where they're at on some sort of a radar, or some sort of a projection of, what needs to be done, how the states are doing. Like this is just somebody who knows what they're doing and wants to help. This is just somebody this is basic coding and a little bit of design and some humor. This is super simple to do, and then a consistent effort. This has been up for years. It's been up for a long, long time. I really think they were helping out too. I think that this data goes a long way for people to not have a misperception about info when they have a casual conversation online or a semi-important conversation online, maybe with a bunch of viewers or with some kind of consequences from the conversation. They can go get real data, and it's not like, oh, so many people, but sometimes they look at it and go, wow, there is this many people dying in Chicago every year.
Mm-hmm. It's also important to remember how many people there are out there with guns, how many guns there are out there. It's a very tiny, tiny fraction of a percent that are involved in any kind of misuse or abuse in any given year. I think that there's well over 600 million. Wait a minute. I'm talking too fast and losing my train of thought, because 100 million, 120 million people, 300 million guns. Yeah, 600 million guns in circulation, I think, is a conservative estimate. They said 300 million for a long time, and then slowly crept that up to around 400 million. I think we're well over 600 million. And on this layout that's on display now of the various organizations, of course, we at the Firearms Coalition are the small yappy dog in that group. I don't know if you could fairly put us in that overall picture, because we don't have big programs, we don't have huge membership, we don't spend millions of dollars.
Well, I put you in there because you're in here, obviously, and you're focused on the national level, but also because your dad invented the thing. And if, different circumstances, different resources, whatever, you could easily be playing the role of or at the level of one of these others. Again, and all that would have taken is just to roll the dice differently, people paying a little bit more attention to something, somebody getting mad about something Charlton Heston did, and looking into your dad's positions on stuff so that a bunch of attention or resources got funneled in at a time. So who knows? And
right.
And plus, we also had to deal with, none of this happened in a vacuum. This happened in the United States, where we had an assault weapons ban hit us. And what did we really do? We cleared house. So immediately we had a knee-jerk reaction, right? We had a book that came out in 2001 that I'm reading right now. And then the antis took a pause, and they realized that it wasn't a no-brainer or a given. They couldn't have anything they wanted. And I think that's why they went after healthcare. I'm not a strategist enough in the past to know all the different consequences of it. But now we don't have all of that same stuff for sure. And what was effective then, or what we needed then, or what was the result of the situation then, is all different now. But
but at the same time,
the scope is the national level, and your scope was to bring awareness and the same kind of goals. Some of these other goals are just like to train or to, offer industry awareness or something. Like the goal is too specific to be for what nowadays, in 2021, someone who's like, okay, I'm upset, I'm concerned, what can I do? I already thrown money at one organization. What did that even do? That's, I guess, where I'm looking. So,
well, and
in that case, you can take money and do stuff. I'll shut up.
Well, my thing is that one of the things that we really focus on is helping the local grassroots groups, the state organizations, to be as effective as possible. And the thing that I would tell everybody, if you're considering making a donation to support the Second Amendment, the first place to go is your local state level grassroots organization. That's who needs your money the most, and that's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck, and that's where the rubber hits the road, that the things that they're dealing with are going to have the greatest impact on your daily lives, typically. But now we've got everything going on at the national level, and this is probably our biggest contribution at the Firearms Coalition is our historical perspective, because we've been in this fight forever. Dad was writing about Second Amendment issues back in the 60s and was a leader of the fight by 1966. So, we have institutional memory going back, and it's critical that Second Amendment activists today have familiarity with history and understand what's been tried, where we've already been, what's worked, what didn't work, and why we are where we are now. I think that that's just really critical, because I can't tell you how many times I talk to especially younger guys, and they are convinced that they have the solution. They know exactly what we need to do and should do and ought to be doing. And it's something that we did back in the 60s or the 70s, and we know the result of that. And so we know, we're smart enough that we know not to do that again. But
or if you can contribute the knowledge you had back then, though, because if it wasn't a success back then, you can at least offer that, and they can use that this
right.
time.
They need to be respectful of the fact that we've been burned. We have the scars on our fingers from touching the hot stove. We've been there and learned that lesson so that they don't have to. And unfortunately, too frequently, these guys want to learn that lesson again. And it's like, no.
Well, hold on. I was just talking to Clover about something I saw in a video, like a TED Talks type of video, that made me change my mind recently about that. Because I, up until just like a couple, maybe a week ago, I would have had the same attitude on that. But I'm changing my attitude on that. But let me ask first, what would you call Gun Owners of America's role, or what is their contribution? I guess the better way to say it.
Gun Owners of America is a direct action lobbying organization, and
Direct action lobbying is different than regular lobbying, or
they're more grassroots focused, and they're more.
The direct action is sort of like grassroots, and then lobbying would be like an additional role.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And is there more, or I don't want to cut you off?
No, that's basically what they do. They're involved in well, and in electoral politics as well. They get involved. So,
in other words, like helping to evaluate politicians.
Right, and endorsing politicians, providing money in some cases, but
What did you call that? Electoral politics?
right. And I think that that GOA has the potential to do much more than they have done. They, I think that there's a lot of potential in GOA, and I hope to see them fulfill more of that potential as time goes on.
Well, let me go around and get these. And anybody who's out there, I hope you're not watching this, right? This is our problem, is that people sit around watching other people do stuff, right? You either got a link and you can be part of this, or if you don't got a link, you got a keyboard in front of you or some sort of way you can wiggle your finger and then, throw in points or challenge us and whatever. Echo chambers are nice, and Jeff's got the best take on echo chambers I've heard in the 2A yet. But Clover, if you got something to throw in here. But let me just go through and try to get like a bullet point thing like this for each of them, and then let's dig in if you got the minute, if you got the time, because that's really what I was hoping to get into today, is basically to figure out what our field is, where our playing field is. So where would you say firearms policy is?
FPC is doing more of what we intended to do from the get-go. They're helping a lot of the grassroots groups to more at the local level. And one of the things to also categorize the attitudes of the different groups.
Oh, okay.
FPC is a bit more thoughtful and a bit more diplomatic. They do a lot of legal work. GOA is more in your face. They're more aggressive, and can be aggressive to the point of it being a problem, but usually aren't. They usually don't take it that far to be problematic, but they are much more aggressive than NRA or FPC or Citizens Committee.
Well, I don't want to use aggressive. That has connotations. So I'm going to say like, what's a better word to say? Like focus, 2A focus. No. What do they call it?
Aggressive is the word.
Well, no compromise, right? They say no compromise.
Right. They're very strong about saying that they're no compromise, but we all say that. They, as I described them initially, GOA is more activist in their activity.
And in other words, holding the rally instead of just making awareness of the rally.
They're getting people involved and getting in your face and demanding. Let's put it that way. GOA is more demanding, where FPC and NRA and Citizens Committee are more diplomatic in their approach. That's probably the most diplomatic way of saying it.
Okay. But addition FPC does the would you call litigation? Is that when they take
Right.
cases up? So I'll just
Yeah, and everybody does a little bit of that. Well, of these groups, everybody does a little bit of that. It gets involved in all of these. It's more of a strong point with FPC.
because they've got like a bunch of lawyers now on the.
Yeah, they've got several lawyers on staff, including our good friend Adam Kraut. They do more technical stuff for the grassroots guys, which is very helpful. Having help with website design and technical issues is great, and the FPC tries to fill that niche a little bit.
I don't know what to call it. I'll just say community support. But I'm still trying to figure out how I want to put all this together. If anybody's got ideas, let me know. So nothing's in stone here. So then let's go to ILA. It's basically lobbying, or do they?
Right, and the difference with ILA from everybody else is primarily, they have the money and they have the staff, and so ILA is able to get directly involved in state and local politics. ILA has someone in every state legislature. Their someone might be involved in 2 or 3 or 4 different state legislatures. They have a legislative liaison assigned to every single state legislature. They track every bill.
In other words, unlike, hey, we can hit this one and you can hit that one, and then together we might hit all of them and we'll overlap one place. NRA is just everywhere. There's always an NRA. Mm-hmm. And like you say, maybe one person is aware of 4 states, but they've got somebody everywhere always paying attention. Right.
And there's not a whole lot of cooperation between the groups as far as you do this and I'll do that. It would be nice if there was, but there's not.
Well, maybe more of it's like nobody's doing this, so I'm gonna.
Yeah. Okay. I see a hole, I'm going to jump into it. The problem with NRA and their state lobbying is that they have a tendency, NRA has a massive tendency to be top down, that they decide things up on Waples Mill Road in Virginia and then send it down to the states. And at the state level, the legislative liaison looks at the situation and then comes in with their proposal, whether it came from ILA top brass or it was an action taken, a command decision down on the ground. They can screw stuff up real quickly because they don't have a good track record of listening to their people with the boots on the ground who know the state legislature. And so they have a long history of tromping in and screwing up a good deal and snatching defeat from the jaws of victory.
So the way I look at it could be 2 ways. Like you've got a aircraft carrier, a giant entity, and then you've got small entities, and they all do their different jobs. So the aircraft carrier is supporting aircraft which are dealing with a fight way over the horizon that we don't even know is happening, but it's critical. Or maybe it's not, because it doesn't really matter, because that's their job is to do something that is different than the tasks of the PT boats, which are stopping like the robot dolphins from swimming up and attaching mines to the aircraft carrier and stopping that overall goal of being accomplished, right? So when the aircraft carrier makes a turn and crushes 4 PT boats, I don't want to blame the aircraft carrier right off the bat. And if the aircraft carrier captain is a jerk and he goes, yeah, well, we're fighting here, then that can be annoying. But you know what I'm saying? Like, you can't go, we don't want an aircraft carrier anymore, and you can't go, let's change generals every time something like that happens. Now, if it happens every single time and there's like a pattern of it, and we're running out of PT boats and nobody wants to be a PT boat captain anymore because you're just going to get killed by the aircraft carrier, that's a different situation. But you know what I'm saying? In war, I think there's more going on. So when if a national level organization, to put it back into stuff, is trying to fight, let's say, a national level issue, and a state level issue needs to be sacrificed or moved or something, and they don't have the resources or the awareness or the interest in letting the state level people know why. Maybe it's not strategic to let them know that this is, they're about to have their throats cut, but it's intentional because you're getting your throat cut. It's going to help us on a national stage over here. And again, people are going to be in that state and go, hey, that's not fair to us. But, if it gets us 3 steps closer to some overall plan, as long as people have confidence in the overall strategy, then I guess the more people are going to be okay with getting a throat cut here and there. But that's, again, dependent on if there's some overall strategy or whatever. So I don't think there's any indication that there's ever been overall strategy or any, there's no 4D chess going on that anyone takes seriously. It's, they claim 4D chess every time there's carnage. But that's all I'm saying is I don't think you need to get rid of the aircraft carrier. I think what you need is either better tugboats or a better captain who's aware, or maybe even a captain who has a chain of command that can hear the needs of those PT boats, right? Like, so that you don't unnecessarily step on people, but every once in a while when somebody's gonna get their throat cut, you can say, hey, we're gonna step on that PT boat, abandon ship first. So we're just losing resource. We're not losing any lives.
Right. And the analogy kind of fizzles out in reality. The reality is that they have a pretty elaborate structure going down to the grassroots, but there isn't a chain of communication coming back up the chain from the grassroots to headquarters. And that's their serious, significant downfall.
It's just give us the money you collected, and here's your marching orders.
Right.
Shut up. Give us more money.
Right. And here's what we're going to do in your state. Here's what we're going. And the countless number of times that a state activist lobbyist is on the ground in the legislature, has a bill that's moving and everything is looking good, and then the NRA ILA legislative liaison comes in and says, oh, by the way, we want this bill to be passed, and it's completely different from what the local guys have been working on. It shoots it in the foot, nothing gets passed, or something worse gets passed, and it all falls apart. And that's directly due to not listening to the people on the ground. You also get examples of NRA putting out grades on local level politicians that are completely devoid of any meaning. That this guy stabbed us in the back last year, and he's our number one target to get rid of because he stabbed us in the back, and here comes NRA giving him an A+, and it's just simply because they didn't ask us before they gave that grade. And that's, that's the NRA's biggest weakness. Their biggest strength is, of course, their numbers, and from an operational standpoint, the big strength is that they've got money and people. They have staff large enough to keep track of everything that's going on across the country and to have a finger in every pie. But then they fall down when it comes to trying to listening up the chain. Everything rolls downhill from Waples Mill.
Well, they're good at creating the infrastructure, but useless at using the infrastructure strategically for anything other than collecting more infrastructure or funds or resources.
Right. It's this. You've got this aircraft carrier with the carrier battle group behind him, but the aircraft carrier is doing nothing but firing his guns in all directions and not getting any of the intel that's available from all of those other ships,
Sure.
not supporting them in their activities that they're going. It all, occasionally they'll direct them to do something, but
And you can kind of assume what it's going to do based on what's coming, but yeah, it's no like coordinated effort, and certainly not working.
Right.
And when, as you describe that, it sounds like if we had a well working mechanism where there was that back and forth awareness and the distribution of resources where needed, then antis who are looking at trying to do something dumb, passing a law wise, bill or whatever they come up with, would see, oh wow, there's a well organized, useful, like effective resistance coming from that giant infrastructure. Let's not bother. Or maybe they'd have to harden up a lot. But either way, we don't have that.
And what we have a tendency to do as a movement, whether it's with GOA or with NRA or a little bit less with FPC, I've had less dealings with them on the political front, but my strategy, my legislative and political strategy says that the two are tied together, and you have to utilize them as being tied together. If I'm running the legislative effort in a particular state, I'm going to try and put forward bills that I want to pass and that I think can pass. And I'm also going to put forward legislation that I know is popular with my guys, that I know doesn't have a snowball's chance of passing, because I want, and I'm going to push to get a vote on that piece of legislation. And the Republicans and the Democrats are going to try and keep me from getting a vote on that legislation because they don't want to hang their people's shorts out in the wind. But that's my main objective, is to get record votes on hard legislation, so that when it comes politics time, when it comes election time, I can pick up those votes and I can tell people directly, this is how this guy voted, either keep him or get rid of him. And that's a huge tool. And I don't see that being effectively used. The GOA and NRA have a tendency to just shoot at everything all the time. And I think that it would be much more effective if they would hold their fire and focus their fire better as they move forward.
All right, so let me stop for a second so it's not too random. First off, Clover, if you're going to add anything, feel free. Again, people that are participating in the outside of this thing, on the other side of the microphones and cameras, on the other side of the internet, use the keyboard like Weston did. Says the NRA doesn't lift a finger and then wants credit for good legislation. I think that's a defeatist attitude, and I'm not pro NRA as much as I'm pro being aware of our resources. And I'm never going to get on the side of like, let's not pay attention and then throw away a 150-year-old organization that has 5 million members. I've been to our three museums and been into the vault downstairs at the Virginia place, where we have museums that are filled with archives with our history, which is donated by individuals, members of the organization. From talking to Jeff and just knowing people, we have a couple of bad people at the helm of a battleship, but we certainly don't want to sink a battleship or watch a battleship burn, which Bloomberg would be paying a bunch of money to accomplish if he could, but instead would get it for free, right, from us.
Mm-hmm.
Like that
Right.
seems a ridiculous strategy.
No,
I was gonna I'll let you, I'm interrupting you, but just to palate cleanse, I'm going to ask you next, 0 to 100, just in general, how each of these organizations are doing based on what everything what they could be doing optimistically and how they're doing, just so that if someone was deciding from listening to our conversation, I'm going to throw $100 down. Am I going to give $25 to each? Am I going to give 20 to, how am I going to do this? And that's what I'll ask next, so you can start churning that. But now I'll stop interrupting whatever you're about to say there.
Well, I was just going to say in response to Weston's comment, that does happen, and they do you get claims of them trying to take credit for my actions, or me trying to take credit for their actions, or this guy trying to take credit for those actions. And that absolutely happens. It doesn't happen every time. And frequently there is something going on behind the scenes that might not be as obvious as what else is going on. But my dad, when he was the executive director of NRA ILA, had a plaque on his desk. He had two plaques on his desk. One of them said, just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean they're not after me. And the other one said, it's amazing what you can get done if you don't care who gets the credit. And Dad got a lot of amazing things done because he wasn't worried about who got the credit. And I would love to see that attitude more prevalent in the community. But unfortunately, the fact that fundraising plays such an important role in what we do, we all want to be able to say, hey, I did something good, and if you give me more dollars, I'll do something else good. And that's it's the nature of the beast, unfortunately, that you have to reach out that way and do that. I got accused of stealing credit for something one time, because in my newsletter I said, well, I saw Representative Jindal going by. I buttonholed him, rode the elevator up to his office, and we chatted, and we talked about him sponsoring the no suspension of the Second Amendment during an emergency bill. And he subsequently went on and sponsored that legislation, and it passed. Well, I got accused by NRA ILA of falsely claiming credit for that, because it was NRA's bill, and NRA recruited Representative Jindal to sponsor it. But Representative Jindal didn't know anything about it until I rode the elevator up to his office and said, hey, you know something that would be really good for you? You're the perfect guy for this. NRA's running a drill. They want this legislation passed. I know they're looking for a sponsor for it in the House. You should give Chuck Cunningham a call over at NRA and get on that bill. And he said, well, that sounds good. I'll do that. So yes, it was NRA gets the actual credit for passing the bill and getting Representative Jindal on it, but I'm taking the credit for telling Representative Jindal about the bill and putting him in touch with NRA. And so that's the way some of that works sometimes.
So I'm going to ask you again here. We're going to go through, and Clover also, because this is just an opinion really, how well you think they're doing compared to what they could be doing, like if they had some sort of ultimate resources or ultimate awareness or use of the analytics or something. Okay, but I was going to say something else, but I guess I'll just go right into that. So I don't know, is that something you're willing to contemplate? I want to put in with Firearms Coalition. I didn't want to leave you out here either. What the goals of Firearms Coalition are.
Our primary objective is information education, providing information, and being a historical repository for the rights movement. But our mission is to arm the grassroots. And that means giving them the information that they need to make intelligent decisions, and to motivate them to take action on those decisions. Also, we're not just educating our guys, we're preaching out to the general public as much as we possibly can, and trying to find ways to make that to wake people up to the fact that gun control laws harm them. They don't just harm me. And the most important issue, and this is something that to preach to the choir, when you get into a debate with someone about gun control, the first thing that you should always tell them is the only thing that we want, the gun rights movement wants, is for you guys to leave us alone. We're not asking for anything. We're asking you to respect our rights and to leave us alone. And that's the position that we have to start from. And every law that anyone proposes, they need to reframe the language of the law to refer it to themselves, me personally, that if you want to say it's too dangerous to allow me to purchase a firearm and take it home the same day without a criminal background check, that's ridiculous. I know that it's not stupid to sell me a gun and let me take it home that day without a criminal background check. And that's what 99.99% of everyone who purchases a firearm in any given year would say. And so we have to take it that direction. But anyway, that's what we do, is support the grassroots. I work with grassroots leaders around the country. I consult with them and encourage them and help them work out their strategic plans and their political plans. And we provide information. And that's what we primarily do. I don't officially lobby anymore. We used to lobby. Dad was much better at that than I am. But I moved the organization out of the DC area and out here to Arizona. And I talk with legislators and I talk with legislative staff, both at the national and various state levels. But I don't register as a lobbyist, and I don't engage in enough lobbying to require me to register as a lobbyist.
I'm going to try to get more participation from the 11 or so people that are out there watching at this moment. Whoever might also be watching that we don't know about that's out there and wants to participate. But do we know how big each of these organizations is? We hear the number of like 5 million for the NRA. And I know that GOA, I can only assume, is growing.
The different organizations look at membership differently. My organization, like I say, I'm the smallest that you're including in this group, and we're a few thousand, although many of those few thousand are groups that might include a few thousand. So I have gun clubs and local grassroots organizations and things like that are part of my organization, but I don't have formal memberships, and we don't count that way. I'm not sure how Firearms Policy Coalition does it, and I don't know what kind of membership they have. I know that GOA claims a couple of million supporters, and that's a very loose term. It's pretty much anybody that signs up for their newsletter, their electronic newsletter, or donates any money to them is considered a supporter. And SAF and Citizens Committee kind of run the same way, that it's not necessarily a dues-paying member, but might just be someone who has expressed support for the organization.
Okay, so like an email list combined with subscribers on a channel even, or...
Right, any of that thing, anything that they can say, this person supports what we do, we're calling them a supporter. And that's the way all of the anti-gun groups, all of them work, is that anybody whose email address they have is considered a member or supporter of their organization. Where the NRA is the only one that I'm aware of that really does keep solid membership stats, and they have to for their magazine advertising rates. And so you can look in any NRA magazine and you can find their little ad section. There will be some statement, circulation statement, and that has to be relatively accurate. It's illegal for them to do it otherwise. They would be in a lot of big trouble. So when they say they've got 5 million members, they've got 5 million members, and it's audited and it's proven by their magazine circulation.
Just to kind of get an idea of that. So then, is it possible to do some sort of like how effective are they being, and do they have the potential to be more effective? I guess that's really what I'm asking, to not put
Well,
you.
if you want me to run through it, I can. I don't know FPC well enough to give a good breakdown on them. They're relatively new. They're fairly aggressive. I know that they've got an aggressive litigation program going on, and they've got some very good people working for them. So I think that they've got a lot of potential, and that they're doing well. Um, GOA GOA's been out there since before NRA ILA. Um, H.L. Richardson was a member of the board of directors when he formed GOA, and he got the NRA's blessings to do that. Um, and his success was probably a lot of the impetus for creation of ILA. Um, I would say that GOA is running at about probably between 60 and 70% of their potential. Um, and I think that they would do well to bring on more young guns with good ideas to expand their influence.
Now, do you
Um,
mean like they've got Rachel and John, and
oh,
do they have other
absolutely.
like individuals who are doing stuff?
Yeah, if I were GOA and I had Rachel Malone on my payroll, um, I would be looking at bringing her to DC if I could, um, because she's good, and I would be looking for other people like Rachel
And
to
she's just getting started. She's literally
right,
like out of school 3 years ago or something, right? She's barely.
right. Yeah, and she was the executive assistant to the Republican Party chair of Texas, and then became the GOA rep in Texas, and she's exactly the kind of person that we want. And this is one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is there are jobs available in this field. Um, and you've got to pay your dues. Yes, you've got to, you got to work for free in most cases for a little bit, but there are now more writing opportunities than there have ever been because the internet is out there, and internet publications are looking for content, and hard copy publications are looking for content and are willing to pay for that in some cases. But again, you got to pay the dues, you got to do the work, you got to establish yourself, and it takes a little bit of time. But working with your local grassroots, you can do that. So I think GOA has a lot of potential to do even more than they're doing now. And I think their heart's mostly in the right place. I think they get distracted on other quote unquote conservative issues, and I think that creates problems for them. But overall, I think they're doing good work, and I think they could do more. Um, the Citizens Committee and Second Amendment Foundation, I think their litigation front and Second Amendment Foundation is great. They It has been great in the past. I think that they could do a little bit more in that direction. I'm not sure exactly what they're doing now. It might be that I'm just out of the loop on it. But Alan has been instrumental in helping to start more public discussion of firearms. He was the impetus behind Gun Talk Radio and bringing Tom Gresham into radio. And bless his heart, that's been a great boon for the gun world to have Tom Gresham's Gun Talk Radio out there and all of the spinoffs of that. So there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes with these groups as well. Wrapping things up, I think NRA is firing on 3 cylinders. If it's a V8, I think that they could be doing so much more if they could get their focus off of saving their own butts and padding their own pockets and focus more on the job and getting it done, and focus a whole lot more on listening to the boots that are on the ground and building a good feedback channel back up the hill, so that they're taking advice from the people who know what's going on in the state legislatures. I think that they would be hugely more successful. I have not been impressed with their legislative agenda at all for most of the last 20 years. And that's the big disappointment for them at the federal level. They've kind of just coasted along and gone along with whatever seems to be popular at the time. And when they're not stepping on their own toes, they can sometimes get something accomplished. But they've just not. They've been shooting squibs for quite a while now, and it's disappointing. I'm a life endowment member of NRA, and I want to see them successful.
Right. So I'm not one to just be aware. I'm not here to observe. So when you say a third, or I put 30% in here based off what you were saying. I'm convinced. I believe that the NRA again is an organization. I've been in the buildings. It's a bunch of buildings. I've seen in the museums. I've been there. I've been to a lot of ranges that use NRA protocols. I know instructors. We're going to talk about that in a second. I know instructors that use NRA credentials and training as a consistent measure across the nation. So, the NRA is a lot of things. The things that it does are the directions that it goes, and the actions that it takes are the results of individuals. Those individuals are in the seats of decision making based on the membership and the inactivity of the membership. Your dad is a freaking example of the membership taking action that was not in the rules or decided upon by the quote unquote leadership. So the fact that the membership, those who are still members, and not just deciding from afar, judging from afar without even having any skin in the game, but the people that are members are the ones that are not taking it upon ourselves to, over the last however many said 20 years or whatever. I would say more like, I'm sure that the problems have been happening since the 90s, but I think that people barely became aware of them and then maybe became empowered enough to understand that we could do something about it in the last maybe 3. So I think for sure it's getting harder and harder to cast blame on anybody but the membership anymore. But we have more and more opportunity to do something about it. So in that case, if the NRA is all those things, a bunch of offices, a bunch of guns, there's a library that's impressive, there's a gift shop, there's an elevator. I mean, I've been not everywhere in it, but I've been all over those buildings. I've been all over Whittingham Center. I've been up and down inside of the one in St. Louis. Like I said, I've been around in different ranges. Those are the places that the NRA is. And the people that happen to be staffing them right now are what the NRA are right now, right? But with everything that is the NRA, you think it's assuming it's still salvageable, and you put that preference on it. You're saying that it's about 30% of its use. Like if we could, let's say, fumigate, bring in people that know what they're doing and understand the mechanisms, to steer the ship and that don't need to be trained up. Are we at 30%? Like we'd expect to see it about 70% more effective from where it is right now? Or is that a good number, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair assessment, because there's so much potential there that's just being squandered.
But it's not like it's wasted. It's not like they burned it down. They're just not doing anything with it. It's just sitting there, and it's not rusty. It's just not being used.
Well, it's not being used effectively, and yeah. So, I mean, a lot of it has been wasted. I mean, hugely wasted. But hundreds of millions of dollars have been wasted. You can always have policy disagreements and disagreements on what the best course is. And one of the big challenges in the Second Amendment world is that our issue is not complicated. It's not like figuring out quantum mechanics and how you could fold time and space and move from this point to that point in the blink of an eye without ever exceeding the speed of light. But our issue is just pretty straightforward. These are my rights, leave them alone. And everybody in the fight believes that they have the answer, that they know what the best course to take would be. And that Dad described as herding cats, because everybody thinks that they're leading the charge and they're all leading in different directions. And this is why the loss of guys like my father were so critical. The elder statesmen of the Second Amendment movement, there's a hole there. There's a gap at the top. We don't, Wayne LaPierre should be that elder statesman, that guy who has been there, done that, earned the gravitas, the respect, and he threw that out the window. Along the way, he did a fairly good job of discrediting my dad. And where does that leave us? Larry has some issues that have made it hard for him to be the main guy. Although, by golly, Larry is and knowledgeable and firm standing man. I appreciate the dickens out of him. Alan Gottlieb, again, someone that I truly respect and appreciate. And I don't always agree with him. I have a tendency to think that Alan is a little bit too ready to make a deal in order to, avoid getting a worse deal. But, brilliant mind. I mean, Alan Gottlieb is a blooming nuclear scientist. He has a nuclear engineer, has a degree in nuclear engineering. So, brilliant man, but and sharp head for business. But it's a challenging thing. We're herding cats. There is no one right now that I can think of that people look to and say, yeah, that guy. Tom Gresham fits that to a degree. Tom is very straightforward, very logical, very thoughtful, very cautious in the way he approaches things. And I deeply respect Tom. And so he's one of those guys that is becoming that respected voice that that a lot of people can look to and can trust and possibly can follow. There are a few others that are influencers, but not an influencer to the level that we would really love to see, and that would really make a huge difference for our movement.
There's not going to be a good transition, so if you want to just jump in, Clover.
I think I put Clover to sleep.
He might have walked away again.
Nah, I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of shift to what we were. You got Jeff in here. You don't put me to sleep at all, Jeff. I'm in awe.
No, because the only thing I was going to do is add the DC project to all of this, so we can do that in another discussion if you want. But
Well, it sort of lines up because I still want to talk about these organizations, but we started off when we talked about the liberal gun owners and stuff when we first started. So I was just going to kind of bring it back around because I've never had that conversation with Jeff. And yeah, I'm in awe listening to Jeff with the history of these organizations and stuff his dad did and all that. But so I'm curious. There's two things, and I want to hit you with them at the same time. But the first thing that I see, we've seen it from the NRA. I see it with Second Amendment Foundation. I can't say I see it with very many other organizations, but those two come to mind where I've seen it, where there's this melding and mixing of other political issues and also a melding and mixing of political alliance and ideology from a partisan perspective. And so with the organizations and your understanding of all the organizations that are out there, is that potentially a problem that could be a problem moving forward? And do you think these organizations recognize that, or is it going to take the old crowd, and no offense to anybody, I'm not calling anybody necessarily old, but the older people, is it going to take them dying off and the younger people taking the reins of those organizations to change that? Or is it something you think they're already thinking about and moving toward to get some of the partisanship and the other political ideas out of the 2A?
Challenging. We're all stuck on our personal philosophies and my ideas are the best. The movement itself, a lot of people in this movement have been reaching out towards younger people for a long time and encouraging younger folks' involvement. My good friend Phil Journey, who was elected to the NRA Board of Directors last year, in spite of being a good friend of mine, used to at the Gun Rights Policy Conference for decades. Phil has given the same speech almost every year, and it's that he looks around and says, "Hey, look around at all the gray hair in this room, and where are the young people that are going to lead us forward?" And for many years, I was the young guy sitting in the room looking around going, "Hey, what am I, chopped liver?" And now, my hair's not very gray, but I'm an old guy, and that's, I'm 60 going on 61 this year, and that's kind of a shocker to me. But yeah, we absolutely need to get these younger guys in, and there are so many natural markets and fits to bring them in. G had the thing about the gamers, and absolutely gamers are people that we want to bring into the fold. All of these kids that are out there talking about wanting a sniper and not understanding that it's a sniper rifle, not a sniper, but can rattle off their various models of Glocks and the M249 and the M240 Bravo and all of their guns from.
But it's so far beyond that. That was the conversation, like when it went from Atari to PlayStation and the kids started playing online together. But now you've got generations that sit online spending as much time as some of us that are YouTube centric. So we spend a lot of time listening to each other talk about stuff because we're from back in the days where we talk to each other and we use this live situations to do it. They spend as much time all just zoning in on a shared environment that they're shooting each other or running around with tanks or driving around in boats. I mean, there's all different kinds of video games, but they'll spend hours, as much time as our parents scolded us for watching TV. I haven't owned a TV since forever because I spent all my time online, but I'm still spending my time, right? There's these people that are spending their time on the video games. And I mean, we know what they're doing when we're online shopping. We know what they do when we're online using the social platforms to share things around with each other, the attention they spend. They know that the money they can make. Are you telling me that something as large as Hollywood, where there's literally generations, like parents and their children will sit around together after work, after school, spending their entire evening playing a video game? Like, there's not stuff being programmed into there about what to buy or what choices to make. I mean, maybe I'm tinfoil hat, maybe I'm crazy, but maybe the capitalists have just decided, oh, that's a lot of time that we'll just leave these people alone and we won't be harassing them. But yeah, what if there's place where you have time spent, right? There's some influence there, and what's the 2A position there? And
Well,
we've had discussions about what if the time spent is on a video game where you're running a gun shop or a virtual situation where the whole thing is about gun control gone crazy. What if San Andreas or whatever what's the name of that one that's so bad? The
Grand Theft
Grand
Auto.
Theft
Grand
Auto.
Theft Auto. What if it was Grand Theft? This is the world with gun control. So the whole perception is this is what the chaos would be like when gun control actually takes effect. What would that perception have been like? Like, why don't we take some of that view of the video games and not just, oh yeah, the kids know what guns are. I'm talking about all the time we're spending, the consoles. What if the consoles were like, I'm buying the Second Amendment Foundation console or the Gun Owners of America console? What if, like, what's this guy said at the Phoenix Gun Rights Policy Conference? What if we started to put gaming on there and we started betting on video games? And what if it's like sports shooting, Gary Micklick's type stuff, or the girls that win the gold medals in shotgun in the Olympics all the time? What if it's those kind of video games that were the norm? Wouldn't that move the Overton window? I'm monopolizing the situation, so I just want to throw it that way, and I'll shut up.
Well, I want to bring all of the first person shooter gamers and all of the paintballers and all of the airsofters. I want to take them to the range. I want to give them real guns and let them shoot real guns at real targets and play the game for real. One of the greatest videos I think I've ever seen was Lucas Bodkin over at T-Rex Arms. On his YouTube channel, he and some other guys got together and they paid for a young Japanese guy's airline ticket to Tennessee so that he could shoot real guns, because they saw his YouTube videos, or maybe it was Instagram anyway, of him running airsoft guns and doing it right, because he had watched all of these YouTube videos on the right way to handle guns and clearing malfunctions, and just his gun handling was superb. And they put a real gun in his hands, and we got to watch him fire his first live round and learn what recoil was about, and see him in a matter of what I'm sure was just a couple of hours move a guy who had never fired a gun to a guy who could keep up with really good guys on an action range, transitioning target to target and so forth. And I guarantee you that kid from Japan, his desire now more than it ever was is to be in a place where he can shoot real guns, not just pretend like it, like he does with airsoft. And all of those, I think, are guys, folks, people that we need to bring into our fold in any way that we possibly can, and the easy way to do it is to, of course, now the ammo is more expensive than gold, but stock up on ammo and talk to the kids and say, hey, come on, let's go out to the range and I'll let you shoot that for real. And then we convert them to Second Amendment appreciation, and they're the new vanguard. And of course, the military is doing a lot of that for us, that all of these young guys who go and serve in the military and come back enjoying guns and wanting to do a little bit more. That's always been a recruiting tool.
That's 3% for lucky that even enlist, and then they got to be something that they even like guns, because I definitely knew people that didn't even like guns. And
right. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Stay away, or you can always, do range time for somebody else or something, I guess. But anyway, Clover is I don't know, did we kind of went off on that a little bit? Did that? You were mainly asking.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We really didn't, it really didn't hit on. I mean, it hit on the younger aspect, and I mean, I do think that younger generations, when it comes to 2A, are more. They don't dilute near as much stuff, and I think part of that is just being being raised in a different type of society. I just think there's a lot of factors that contribute to that. So I think that when you have the leaders of these big 2A organizations that are, say what you want about Trump, for example, but definitely a polarizing figure, and they're buddy and rah Trumping things, that from an organizational standpoint, I don't know how that bodes for some of the younger generations, or like the NRA talking about, abortion, or talking about illegal immigration, or talking about, and so that's an even more, to me, a more egregious approach, because somebody that's just representative from an organization or whatever, and you're right, Jeff, with their personal views and beliefs and ideology and whatever is one thing, but then to put out organization branded stamped stuff that deals with other political, I just see that as a very bad move, and we need to tread really softly in that direction.
Well, and that's what I was talking about. One of the problems I see at GOA is them encroaching out into political areas that aren't Second Amendment, and that's
when you guys are talking about is like an ad that might say like, what's worse, the abortion or gun rights? In other words, bringing it up and assuming that the people are going to have an opinion about both political stances, but really it's being offensive or annoying.
Well, what I see, I think, more than anything, is they'll attack a politician, right? So you've got a politician that maybe has submitted an anti-gun bill, right? And then they'll run a montage that includes, this candidate, supported abortion, and this wants to, now she wants to take your guns, right? And it's like, well, why are we?
As assuming like these are all the things that as a gun owner you must care about, so we're going to throw these in as additional hooks, and then really, again,
right,
either annoying or worse for other
right. And you're isolating when you do that the reach, because you may have a million people that see that identify with the gun thing, but then you lose 200,000 because you mentioned abortion, and you mentioned lose another 500,000.
I hear what you're saying, but this isn't the days of like, at least I guess it depends on what you're talking about, but it isn't only the days of I can only buy a billboard or I can buy a magazine ad, and then I don't know who's going to pick up this magazine other than it's in a gun magazine. Because now it's the days of, if I want an old angry this guy, or a young upset this girl, or somebody from this culture or somebody from that state, you pick that, you dial all that in when you're marketing. So if you can hand pick an ad and go, this is a horrible ad, but it might be the perfect ad for that Yahoo or that uptight or that stick in their butt, right? Like some ads are tuned to those people, and that's how they get the word to those people. And we would want an organization who's adaptable and aware enough to target market, right? But I hear what you're saying. If they are stupid about it, or if they're just throwing it out like, hey, it's no big deal, all gun owners must also assume this, then yes, I agree with you. But I just don't want to throw everything under that curtain, because that was the past. And going forward, I just don't think it's economically prudent. That's why we don't see gun bunnies at SHOT Show. I mean, Who wouldn't want to have a gun bunny? If you're a dude and you're not married, you'd be like, okay, first thing is our expenses is the booth. Second thing is a gun bunny. Third thing is our product, right?
Right.
Like, that nobody wants gun bunnies, so you don't waste that expense, right? So that's, if they're putting out ads that are like you just said, whatever they do, allude to something that's off topic, off 2A, and they're going to figure out that the new breed doesn't want all that stuff. And that's what I was about to get to. And one of my points is that at some point, we're the old people chatting about this because this is how we chat about it. The new kids just are smirky. They'll just remark about what we said with their thumbs on their phones, right? But that's the way that they get together and are doing the equivalent of what we're doing here. At some point, we need to let go and go, here, it's yours now. And you know what's the Second Amendment? So it's pretty solid. It's lived through a whole bunch of generations going, all right, it's yours now. Either you die, you run off a cliff, right? Something happens, but or you die in an old age, something happens, and you hand it off to that next generation. And I'm almost positive every single generation that got it is like, oh shit, this is a lot bigger and heavier than I thought it was gonna. Oh shit, okay, I got it. Now I figured it out. Oh crap, I hope the next generation is going to be able to hold on to this. This thing was bigger and heavier than I thought, and the next generation's a bunch of weaklings. They're never going to be able to hold this up, and then eventually they're holding it anyway, right? So that's one of the things that I think we're having to transition through. We have to realize that we're not the only gun owners anymore. And those youngins, they are like, it's done. Like that election, November, unless I'm wrong, it's over. Our parents are no longer an influence. We're dwindling, and they are nothing but increasing. People that have never been, like, they don't know what it's like to have to go get something and, wait for it or whatever. Like the only thing they ever have to wait for is shipping, or like they get mad when something takes an extra day or two to be delivered. Like they don't even know. Like they live in a whole different world than us. And yeah, they got taught in a whole different way than us, and they're adapting to things in all different ways. And it's not so much that we got to teach them as much as we got to understand what they're going to do and offer them resources. Or maybe I'm getting too old before I need to be.
Right.
Go ahead, put me in check if I'm wrong, but I really think that I'm getting sick. Like I say, every time I do research and I find out about another organization that's 8 or 12 years old, and I go listen to some representative of that organization in 2021 tell me about how we need to be more inclusive to them, I'm like, how, at what point do you need to jump out of the nest, or do you need to be pushed out the nest? You got feathers, you got wings, like you fly around, you go get stuff when you want it, and then you come back to the nest and bitch because we're not doing everything for you. Like, come on, start building your own nest, because at some point our nest is no good anymore.
And that's true of everybody.
And that's the other thing I was gonna go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that kind of leads into, you're talking about some of the organizations that people may not know about, or, whatever the case may be. That was my other thing that I was curious, because again, Jeff is the knowledge bank here on a lot of this. So moving forward, is there a role to be played, a more significant role to be played by some of these, I don't know what to call them, but I'm going to say, like Liberal Gun Club, for example, some of these non-traditional organizations? Is there more of a role potentially for them to play? And is there an angle that we could utilize to help them achieve that role, if there is?
Yes, and yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And the hardest thing for us old farts to do in any of this is to kind of step back and let them take the lead. And that's, unfortunately, this is one of the things about when you've been herding cats for a long time, you turn into a sheepdog, and you're always trying to herd. And we really need to step back and say, okay, how can I help? And that's all it takes. Okay, how can I help? Go for it. So, yeah, I'd love to see them do it.
Part of it, and then let me throw in something that when you were talking about the NRA before, I think it applies to this, and give me some barometer if I'm crazy or not. But so the NRA looks like it's overwhelmingly a tower that's been toppled too high. It's leaning too far. Best we could ever hope for is Leaning Tower of Pisa type of situation where we just keep it where it's at as an old fragile relic and mock it, take pictures in front of it, acting like it's a sandwich or whatever the people do, right? But I don't believe that's the case because of what you just said there. I don't think that going forward, we're doomed to what we had to do in the past. In the olden days and old-fashioned technology, just the ways that information and communication happened, it lent itself to having individual stars, like heroes and individuals that were stars. But I think going forward, we got the potential to see more groups have influence, or people contribute to small projects that can take the place of an individual. So I've always been a petition of not having a Bloomberg on our side, instead to come up with systems that allow individuals to understand that we don't need a Bloomberg on our side. Instead, we're much more powerful, and we're actually unappealing to any kind of Bloomberg once we're unified. Like, we don't have to be in lockstep like the Borg, but instead just like Minutemen, where we just know a couple of different calls to action, and when needed, we utilize those in a strategic way, and we have some fun with it. So not only are we resisting them, but we're laughing at them while we're doing it, and we're getting stronger and showing our kids how much fun it is to resist, and not the British like in the old days, but now the dumbasses who think they can own us by, playing off of our needs or what. So with that in mind, we can look at different things that are happening in the recent history, or we can look at things that are immediate history. But there's times when people have run up and played coup on the big, whatever it is, state, companies, whatever, politician, right? You run up and play coup on them, and that gets people all either upset or happy. But I think that's an indication of how you change the NRA. Getting back to the NRA being a big towering thing that looks like it's overlooming. The NRA is, as I mentioned before, 2 big buildings in Virginia, and then there's a museum in the one of those buildings. There's a big vault underneath, and there's a range there. It's awesome. If you ever go to Washington, D.C., go to the NRA place. It's awesome, right? It's free and it's open, and you can hang out there. And it's a museum. It's an awesome museum. There's a museum in in what is it, Branson or someplace, Missouri, and then there's a museum in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico. All worth attending, right? Those are the NRA. But then the NRA is all those ranges everywhere, right? The NRA is the cards in everybody's wallet out there, right? The NRA is huge. So when you start thinking about all those little groups that can do things, can gather individuals, can gather some people, groups that have good solid ideas and together have the resources and abilities to accomplish, those groups, that they take over, like I said in the comments before, the classrooms and the ranges, right? As people gather at classrooms and NRA's classes and at different ranges out there and start to figure out that they're the NRA, right? They're the gun lobby, as Jeff would say. Then what happens at those NRA meetings, those meetings that happen annually in different regions where they fundraise? And what would the murmur be like at the gun shops and stuff when the murmur at the ranges is we're the NRA and we're the gun lobby, right? Individuals can have purpose and they can have effect, right? And then at those national meetings, when those representatives go up the chain, like we just talked about, the mechanism is give me my money and here's your marching orders. When they go, here's your money, but it's not very much. Why? Well, because your marching orders suck. Well, here's your marching orders. I don't think they're going to do them. That's a different conversation than yes, sir, here's your money. So you can say that you have no effect, but if you want to be persistent and not being a member of the NRA, then what if you have the ears of someone who is a member of the NRA and you can start that? So we as individuals have not only the ability, but I would say the obligation to exercise that, because the same thing that we do to exercise that option, and I might be wrong, feel fucking free, sorry for swearing, but I'm not, feel free to freaking make a conversation where you get better people to get together and figure out how to accomplish this. But you get a bunch of people together with just that common goal. I think it was Jeff or maybe somebody like him said, you don't micromanage volunteers. You set them on the goal and stand back and watch and take data on how they did it, how they accomplished it. But you have that common goal. Let's take back the NRA. And then what does that do to the anti-gunners who think they can do anything to us if we just took back our NRA?
Yep, absolutely. And here's an idea for you. If I were the king of the world or the executive vice president of the NRA, for instance, we spend millions of dollars every year paying a telephone solicitation company to call former members and potential members and ask them to re-up their membership or give us money or join the organization. I've long said that I am sure that there are a couple of million old farts that would be more than willing, and I include myself in that number, but would be more than willing to spend some time, donate some time on the phone, making calls. And we've got the technology now that it can all be scripted, it can all be controlled, it can all be done from home. I do it with political clients all the time, but that they make those calls. So instead of some teenager in Iowa who knows very little about the Second Amendment or the NRA calling and trying to convince you to join the NRA, it's Ralph from Alabama, and he loves the NRA, and he wants you to know about the NRA, and he wants to get you involved or back involved or whatever. And at the same time, another division of volunteers that are the NRA game division, the NRA social media division, that are all volunteers with maybe a couple of paid interns to help guide the volunteers and make sure that they're equipped with what they need and to coordinate with them, but that we have a massive presence of people who are coordinated on Instagram and are talking on YouTube and sharing information and have active Facebook pages that aren't just a random Facebook page, but are sanctioned, if you will, by the NRA or some other organization. I think that there's lots of potential for that. If, getting volunteers to do stuff is one of the hardest things that you can ever try and do. I've run a lot of political campaigns. I can tell you, getting volunteers is challenging, but once you get them, it's amazing what you can do with them. And one of the things about getting volunteers is having something for them to do. You've got to have something for them to do. So just getting volunteers isn't good enough. Well, we've got election volunteer coordinators.
It's probably detrimental to have volunteers standing around and get bored, because then that volunteer goes home and goes, those people don't know what they're talking about. I'm not going to, I can't count how many people are like that probably would have been useful, but because it wasn't perfect for them at whatever time, they've now decided that it can't, we're doomed. It can't ever work because it's not handed to them on a plate.
Right. And all of that, there's room for all of it. I would
it's not like you need to give up frivolous jobs. There's literally effort that could be accomplished, right? Like there's all kinds of good work that could be done. And if nothing else, they just exercise and accomplish some tasks, but they're going to get stronger. They're going to,
I would provide free Call of Duty to a whole pile of people that wanted to play Call of Duty and be NRA team players in the game of Call of Duty.
Well, think about if each gun shop set up what do they call? Let's just call it a computer station, whatever the hell, and then had a place or whatever, a network hub, right? People, I don't know how the kids play computer games. Maybe they show up with their phones. Maybe all of the above, but to use their classrooms basically that they already have for CCW classes that they aren't running 24/7, and then instead say, hey, we also board game here, or we D&D here, because D&D is a thing. And what if it wasn't D&D, but instead it was like, why don't we instead of have D&D players? If I flip back up on the screen, my 130 activists that I'm aware of back in 2019 when I did all that work. What if people were doing some kind of 2A D&D, strategizing rolling down different strategies or tactics and different resources, and saying, if we just had a bigger focus on this, maybe that would cause, like you're saying, them to have to defend this. Now we could push this through in New Jersey, right? If we got Bloomberg, who has limited resources, to actually strain, he'd have to at some point make a decision. Am I going to double down, or am I done with this?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he's the guy, but I'm just using him as an example. Everybody on that team would have to decide, hey, am I really in this for the long term, or was I just getting a paycheck from Bloomberg for to do this?
Right. And there's tons of possibilities. There's lots of willingness out there. We just need to find the niches and move into them. And frankly, I don't see the NRA doing any of that kind of stuff. So the state organizations doing it more, and just guys like you and me saying, hey, there's a place where I can make a difference. Here's a place where I can go and wave my Second Amendment banner just quietly in the background while I'm doing something else, and attract people to that Second Amendment banner. potentially. But
No,
there you
seriously, that's all. That's when I talk about the video games. That's what I'm talking about. Like, what if everybody had like hashtag I'm 2A, and then everybody was like, "What's all that about?" Like, oh, dude, you see these guns? Like, they're trying to take these from us. They're trying to make it so that we can't have these, or whatever. I don't care what the conversation is. Like them emancipating their own conversations. But yeah, that's all it really is. It's just sort of small efforts. So that's when you talked earlier, and I kind of alluded to it that I guess we can conclude with this because we're hitting the 2 hour mark, and I definitely appreciate you sticking around for 2 hours. Lots longer in Clover, and nobody else showed up. So I think we had a pretty decent Every Second Matters this month. Thanks to the people out there who've been chatting as well. But as a last point, I did watch something, and like I said, it was some sort of a TED Talk, some sort of thing that was talking more about a specific technical topic, but he casually just sort of said something to the effect of, where was I going? That having big, okay, so I guess my dilemma has been for a long time. Do you keep the NRA going, or do you just let it burn like all the kids, let's just call them the kids, like all the kids want to do, right? They're not getting paid by Bloomberg, but they're going to just let the thing burn, right? So to me, it just seems silly. But then I'm thinking, all right, what if the NRA is just useless? Like, we don't need large national level organizations. Somehow the future is state level organizations, right? And just go ahead and let it burn. Like, maybe there's no point in trying to force or get people to put effort towards something that they obviously have no interest in, right? And like you said, they can put uses towards something else. So I've been wondering that, because I can't do nothing about it. All I can do is wonder about it. But I've been wondering about that for a while now, ever since, like I say, it's been sort of the trend to just watch the NRA burn and everybody be happy with that on both sides, and knowing all the reasons why that's just a waste of time. So anyway, it's been frustrating. So I watched this thing, and the guy says something about, like, do you need traditional stuff, or it's just the nature of organisms that things die and new things come along, and the generation or the evolution of stuff is that the new thing's a little bit different, and that's because of the new circumstances and the new conditions, and it has to be different to evolve. So I guess that is sort of, I don't even know if it's a question or just an insight to what we were to, like, add another spin on what we've been talking about. Is there, when we kind of talked about the effectiveness of the organizations, not in like, are they effective, but like, how much more effective could they be, if everything was perfect or whatever. Is it right now? I guess I think we're living in a world where, like I say, the NRA is not crumbling, but it's leaning over and it's in bad repair. It could easily be turned into a museum. It could easily be returned to its former glory and re-armored and become a massive new tool. It could be stripped down and turned into some massive infrastructure like no one's ever seen before, like some sort of thing that's built on 3D printers out of gravity, right? Collaboratively. Like, why shouldn't it be like the spawn of the new generation? Or they could leave it to rot, and it could be a laughing stock that Bloomberg gets for free, and they get to all walk around with its carcass on a stick, acting like every one of them can poke its dead carcass and go, we did this, you did this by voting for us, we did this, don't worry about the money we didn't give you, all the other things, we did this, right? We could just do that. And I guess I'm tainting the waters here, but what do you think? Is there any credence, I guess, to the idea that these, I guess what I was saying is, I'm setting the stage that the NRA's fallen over, these national level organizations that have existed for a while. I mean, they're old, they're just not as 150 years old, but most of them are like 75 years old, right? I mean, not that old, it's 50 years old. Do we need those even? Or is the future some sort of weird collective, like, organizational flow of a whole bunch of little organizations that pop up, do what they need to do, and then disappear, perhaps, or just, hover in the areas that are necessary to, is it the future a bunch of bubbles instead of big boulders?
Well, it's hard to say what the future is going to be, because I frankly, I think that having national coordination and having national representation is important. And I think that the NRA is positioned best to provide that representation. I think it's good to have multiple organizations that are competing in that space, although I prefer to see them cooperating in that space. back when Dad was head of ILA, he worked closely with GOA and used them as a foil in his dealings with the politicians. That look, you either deal with me or you're going to have to deal with them, and they're harder to deal with than I am. So let's deal. And that was effective and it was useful. So I personally, I think that the majority of the NRA is still intact and still a useful organization. But it's rotten at the leadership central, in my opinion. And I think that there needs to be a restructuring and a reorganization of the whole association. I think that their training and education programs and sanctioning programs for competition are critically important, and I think that I think that those need to continue. They're on we go. But the grassroots guys, the local guys, they are critically important, and they run the states and should run the states. NRA should play second fiddle in the states, and unfortunately they try too often to be the big dog. They're the big dog at the federal level, but at the states they should be they should come in saying, how can we help you? Not coming in and saying, this is what you need to do. Jump to it. So, on we go.
Right on. Well, that'll be our closing things. So we wanted to go for a couple hours. We did. And again, thanks for sticking around for the whole chat. Thanks for everybody who showed up. We'll continue to have these on the second day of each month. Anybody who wants to, that's the whole point. We modeled this after the very loose organizations that don't have a membership. You participate how you want, as long as it's not something weird. Nobody would want that, but as long as it's something that's decent and an interesting way to promote awareness and perhaps bank a conversation. That was the kind of the concept of the logo. It was a non-gun looking thing you could wear into an environment where you couldn't wear like a gun shirt or a logo or something. But maybe somebody would say, what's that all about? And if the opportunity wasn't there to have a conversation about our Second Amendment, you could say, well, let's talk about that later. And then in the future, when you had a chance to talk about it, use that kind of banked topic to bring it up. And every once in a while, when it's comfortable and it's not a big deal, there's no pressure, it seems awkward and unnecessary. And then there's times like the last month, like really, then the media is going to pull strings and force us to pay attention to the worst of everything. And then it's going to get real tense and stressful. And then it's like, oh, I wish I would have been talking to everybody. So with that in mind, that was the whole impetus of this whole thing, knowing that there's this like tendency to be apathetic and not interested in advocacy when there's no immediate threat, and knowing that it's too late to be an advocate when there is immediate threat. We try to, dollar cost average or whatever the word is, we just try to remember on the second of each month to do something. And you don't have to, there's no shame. If you don't, there's no extra awards. If you do, certainly no monetary gain. Nobody's clapping you on the back or nothing, but it's just an effort for us all to be aware and to have an opportunity to do it on a persistent, regular basis. So thanks again, Jeff, and check out Firearms Coalition. Oh, go ahead.
Well, it's just my pleasure. I've not been able to participate in so long, and have really wanted to. I've loved the whole concept of Every Second Matters since the first time I ever saw it, and I'd love to see it catch on and become something much bigger. And so it's a pleasure to be able to check in and participate today.
Right on. Well, that's what keeps us going, because it's not always this. This has been one of the best chats in a while. So thanks again for being part of it. We'll be back to pick you up later.